One of the most sought-after services at the Cohen Center is the Far Infrared Thermal Slimming Treatment. The Pseudotonic creams stimulate sweat glands to break down fatty acids, leaving you with toned skin after a totally relaxing experience. The Cohen Center. The more we see you, the better you look.
Thank you very much. All right, we're going to continue on the issue of... Oh, Jennifer, sorry. Jumping ahead. Jennifer?
Hi. I got it covered, guys. Thanks, Terrence. So the scale of 1 to 10. I would say I would fall within the 5 to 10 range, and I'll tell you why, because for me, that represents caution. And I stand for really looking at the development that comes before us, making sure that we look at the details and critically think about all of those details. Development is park space. Development is office space. Development is affordable housing. Development is adaptive reuse. And so for me, it really is about how the development mitigates impacts, how it fits into our neighborhoods, how it affects residents, how it sustainably suits our community, how it equitably serves the diverse needs of our community. And that's how I approach development in Santa Monica.
Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks, Carl. Continuing on the topic of development, the next round of 3 questions all relate to how candidates would vote on major developments that are currently proposed for downtown Santa Monica. Remember, candidates, if you haven't used your 1 wildcard, this is another chance to use it. If you've already jumped in on a question, that's your chance for the night. I'm going to get Carl to draw the first 5 names. All right, so the names in this order will be Zoe, Phil Brock, John Mann, Nick Bowles, and Whitney Scott Bain. Question 1 for development. Architect Frank Geary and his firm propose a 22-story Ocean Avenue Hotel and Museum campus at the corner of Ocean Avenue and Santa Monica Boulevard. How would you vote on this project as it is currently proposed if you were elected, and why? So Zoe.
That's easy. It's you tell me.
Yes?
Yes, that's easy. I will vote against it. It's way too big, it's way too high. It will create incredible density. It will sacrifice and compromise the quality of life of the residents, and we cannot have that level of development. That's why in the previous question I answered 5. We have to be cautious of that development, and I'm for a slow growth, creative, and very cautious development. Thank you.
Thanks. Phil, you're up next. I'll just repeat the question briefly because I know there's a quick distraction. On the topic of development, architect Frank Geary and his firm propose a 22-story Ocean Avenue Hotel and Museum campus at the corner of Ocean and Santa Monica. How would you vote on this project as currently proposed, and why?
I will never vote for a high-rise on Ocean Avenue. There is one high-rise that's grandfathered in that wants to renovate. I'm fine with them going up 10 stories to match their existing building. The Frank Geary building, it doesn't matter who the architect is. Frank Geary built a great corrugated cardboard chair back in the 80s. He made a really nice little fish necklace for Tiffany's. So you know what? His house is 2 stories. His music center, the Disney Hall, is 6 stories. We never need to sully Ocean Avenue, and we certainly don't need the observation tower he promoted for that center. We have an observation tower in Santa Monica. It's across the street, Palisades Park.
If you could pass that to John. And John, how would you vote on the Frank Geary project?
Well, of course, I'm going to be against any development that isn't approved by the residents. You know, you look around the coast of California, Southern California, and you see all these other cities, Santa Barbara, Manhattan Beach, Hermosa. You don't see this happening there. What is it about Santa Monica that is attracting these out-of-state developers to destroy our city, to bring in more money so the Santa Monica City Employee Associations can feed their greed? That's what this is all about. That's the elephant in the room. This city is not for tourists. It's not for developers. It's for the people who live here, who have a history here. Let's take our city back from the developers and from Santa Monica's renters' rights.
Thanks, and Nick Bowles.
Okay, so I want to start by saying that Frank Gehry is a prolific architect, but as far as that specific project goes, I would not approve it. I would look at utilizing his skills and architectural abilities more in the Bergamot area, because I think that that is the bastion of culture, arts, and diversity in Santa Monica, and to really create a landmark there. So no specifically on that project.
And finally, Whitney, the Frank Gehry project.
Well, I'm going to be the odd man out, and I'm going to say yes, but I've looked at the new plans, and the new plans are aesthetically pleasing, and they work. They don't block the Huntley Hotel at all, and it's lower than the proposed. Different project? Different project. I'm looking at this one. Thanks for letting me know. All right. I would say no on that one, then. But I have seen the new plans, and they work at the Fairmont.
Thanks, Whitney. Do any of the candidates want to jump in and answer the question about the Frank Gehry project? All right. There's still a few people who have it left. All right, the next 5 names that I've just pulled is Kevin McEwen, Jennifer Kennedy, Jerry Rubin, Sue Himmelrich, and Richard McKinnon. The question is, a 12-story development, which includes hotel, office space, and housing, is currently proposed for the city-owned land on Arizona between 4th and 5th Street. How would you vote on this project as it is currently proposed? Start with you, Kevin.
I've already said no to what was proposed to us. That included, to my mind, way too much office space that we don't need, and not enough affordable housing that we do need. We have not yet approved the project. Some people think we have. All we did was, as owners of the land, authorize the architect to come back to us with plans in a certain range, including a taller project. This is a piece of land we purchased so that the city could provide our downtown with many things that residents have told us they want downtown, including that ice rink that's been mentioned. So to fit all that on that land, it's not going to be a 2-story building. What we asked was for the architect, who's a very well-known, world-renowned architect, to come back with a plan that, as best as possible, fulfilled everything the community has asked for without exceeding the 84 limit that's currently on the land, 84-foot height limit. Now, I'm not sure that could be done. And I will keep an open mind. I told the architect and developer, you have to make your case to me. If we're going to exceed the height that is already in our downtown zoning from 1984, make the case. And if it does what the community wants, and if residents say, yeah, that's good for us, then and only then would I be willing to vote for it.
Thanks, Kevin. So Jennifer, the project on Arizona between 4th and 5th Street.
Based on what I know of the project right now, I do not support the project. I do not support the 12-foot height limit that is currently proposed. I'm very interested in looking at how the project mitigates it, how they would propose to mitigate impacts. But all of these details really haven't been brought forward, and it hasn't been before the Planning Commission, so I haven't had the opportunity to look at what some of the very fine-tuned details, just what has been shown to the community so far. And so as it's proposed currently, I don't support the project.
Jerry Rubin.
Well, I went to the town hall forums, and I think it's one of the most nicely designed projects I've seen in years. I think Rem Koolhaus is involved. Open space on the roofs, designed in a magnificent way. The ice skating rink's going to be there. It's going to provide more open space. If it was lower, I don't think 148 feet is really absurdly high. Especially if it was pushed lower and was pushed out to the curb, it would be much bulkier and less open space. So I think it's a great project. I would support it, and I hope everyone does.
Sue Himmelrich.
As the project is currently configured, I can't support it. First, I am, as I said before, opposed to any more office space, particularly in that area. Right now we have, as has been pointed out, 700 residences in the downtown, and or perhaps less, and 27,000 jobs. So we don't need one more square foot of office space. Second, I think that 12 stories is too much, and I'm concerned that the city on its own land shouldn't be setting an example for private developers or setting a trend for private developers to argue that they are entitled to the same. Finally, I think the floor plate as it currently exists on the property takes up too much of the underlying land, and there should be more open space at the ground level. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. And finally, Richard, the project on Arizona between 4th and 5th Street.
The context of the city is what we always have to look at, and I essentially want a horizontal city that has some relationship with the ocean and the beach in the environment that's here. And that's why I rule out a series of hotels along Ocean Avenue, and this building, as proposed 148 feet, should also be ruled out. There are some other issues that the amount of elements that have been asked for by the City Council really can't be contained within the 148 feet as proposed. So something will have to drop out, or the developer will come back and ask for a taller building. Elements of the building as proposed already will loom 100 feet above 5th Street and be 4 or 5 stories high. So as designed, it's a difficult building to contain within the envelope of 4th, 5th and Arizona, and therefore I don't support it in its current form.
Thanks, Richard. Any wildcard holders want to use that on this question? All right, we'll move on to the third development question, which will be answered by Pam O'Connor, Terence Lader, Michael Feinstein, and Frank Gruber. The question is, the Fairmont Miramar proposes a 21-story high-rise as part of its redevelopment at the corner of Ocean and Wilshire. How would you vote on this project as is currently proposed? Start with you, Pam.
Well, first of all, I wouldn't vote on it as it's currently proposed because the environmental impact report needs to be published. We need to understand what the impacts are of the proposed project, alternative projects that that would also fulfill some of the functions that the hotel wants to achieve, but would be a smaller project, a lower project. So that's why you can't, I mean, one could just outright say they're going to be opposed to a project or they're going to be for a project, but without having adequate knowledge about what the final project description is, what the height is, what the lay of the land is, where things are placed, what are the environmental impacts. All of that needs to be studied. Also needs to be community input on evaluating and looking at the EIR, talking about what the benefits are and weighing them. So you can't prejudge projects.
Terence Slater, the Fairmont redevelopment, how would you vote on that?
No, I think, like I said before, no height limit that doesn't exist already, no footprint that doesn't exist already is how I would be able to understand whatever development goes in. Michael Dell is a very nice guy, makes some great computers, but he has a number of our city, government spouses of the employees on his payroll, and a number of them have to recuse themselves from votes from time to time. I think all of that should be, in the interest of transparency, lists of where the money is going with these people and who is under the employment by Michael Dell, and how that we've got a number of investigative reporters out here, much like the toxic dirt from the Metro line. We should look into that as well. So no, I'm not standing for any new development at the Miramar.
Michael Feinstein.
So I'm a beach person, and for me, the perspective from the water's edge down in the sand or Palisades Park or at the end of the pier is where I look for scale, and as proposed, it's way, 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 way too tall. When I was on the council before in the early 2000s, the previous owner proposed a project for this site that didn't have the extra 10 stories of luxury multi-million-dollar condos, and I think it's pretty well known that Michael Dell paid too much for this, and I'm just not willing to finance the project with our skyline with multiple stories of luxury condos that, frankly, going back to my theme before about climate change, are not urban infill. That, that kind of development isn't the public transit-oriented development that we want in our downtown. So there are some good things. Having the corner open to the Morton Bay Fig Tree is good, and I think having some more friendly development along Wilshire Boulevard, low scale, makes sense instead of a parking lot. So there's something to work with, but it's too big now.
And Frank Gruber.
Well, my first understanding is that the 21-story plan is no longer, right? I mean, that was dropped. I oppose that plan from a design perspective. Basically, I've been saying at this place that there's no reason for them to do anything higher than replacing the existing building. And the average, take their FAR, the amount of building they're putting there, and the lot coverage, the average height of buildings should be 6 stories. And with an average height of 6 stories, they really ought to be able to work out something that works for people without going higher than we would want there. But I want to emphasize 2 things. First of all, what Pam said is I think it's really wrong for candidates to say what they're going to do about a project without having all the review and the public input. The other thing I want to say about this project is it actually offers a great opportunity with the residential component of it to make a very good transition to the residential neighborhood up on California. This project, think if it was developed in another city as an office tower, that would be horrible. It's much better to be redeveloping the hotel, rebuilding the hotel to slightly smaller square footage, and then putting residential up on California would be a better project.
Thanks, Frank. Does anyone want to answer that question that has cards left? All right, we're going to skip one of the lightning rounds as we're running a little bit behind time and jump into our last full round of questions. So this is your last chance to use a wild card if you do have that left. After this round of 3 questions, we'll then have a lightning round and then closing statements. Carl, I'll get you to draw names for the questions. These questions relate to traffic and transportation. Second question will be housing, and the third question and final question will be the future. The future. Future Santa Monica. All right, so this is the order for the question regarding traffic. These are 1 minute. We're going to skip the lightning, so this is the last full round. So the question relating to traffic and transportation will be answered in this order. Kevin McEwen, John Mann, Nick Bowles, Sue Himmelrich, and Whitney Scott Bain. This is another question from Mirror columnist Susan Cloak, who printed a Q&A recently, but for those who did not read that, we would like you to air your answers here. The intersection of Ocean and Colorado at the pier is one of the most congested intersections in the city. What would you do to improve traffic flow at this intersection and the overall quality of this intersection? Kevin, we'll start with you.
Well, I have many thoughts about mobility, transportation, and traffic in general, but I'll keep to the specific. This is a very challenging corner that I've been looking at for years, and I already have worked on plans to attack the problem from both sides. From the east, from the landward side, we're planning the Colorado Esplanade, which will channel traffic, it'll provide bike lanes, it should relieve some of the traffic congestion leading to the pier. From the other side, we need to rebuild the pier bridge, and I've worked with our engineers to make sure that when we do so, we solve some of the traffic problems and make that bridge more friendly to bicyclists so they have access to the beach bike path below. One caution I would say about this intersection, we have to be very careful about. Right next to the intersection is a hotel that wants to develop yet another of these coastline towers with condos on top. If we allow that kind of development, that kind of intensity at that intersection, all bets are off, and I'm afraid we've exacerbated the problem.
Thanks, Kevin. John Mann, the intersection of Ocean and Colorado, what would you do to improve traffic flow?
I think I already answered this question in your newspaper. I'm trying to remember what I said. Susan Cloak is a neighbor of mine, and she also ran for city council with me many years ago. One of the things that I notice every time I go to the pier for the Twilight Dance series is that mad intersection of trying to wait for the light to be in your favor. So there's a way to do that that's more effective by having a scramble. And that's when everybody crosses either diagonally, vertically, not horizontally. So other than that, I'm not really an engineer, but I really think that pier is a national monument, not just for Santa Monica, but there's a long history with that pier, so we should do everything we can to make it more available for traffic and pedestrians and bicyclists.
Nick Bowles, the intersection of Ocean and Colorado.
Right. So we've already, had the Colorado Esplanade. Pretty much, it's ready to start. It's going to be starting any day now. And what that'll do is create more room for the pedestrian influx that we're going to see from the Expo line, as well as expanding bicycle lanes and creating one-way throughways. So that in itself will have a huge impact. But to go further, we need to start looking at the neighboring communities. So when they're coming in, that they're not using their automobiles. Specifically looking at rerouting those bus lines so that we have more north and south bus lines moving, making sure that they're higher frequency and that they're geotagged and possibly on demand. So there are a lot of things we can do, but I think besides that specific area, we need to start looking at all the different people from the surrounding communities who are coming through the area to make sure that they're not using their cars and that they're using alternative transportation.
Sue Himmelrich.
Well, in a way, there's not much left to say, but I, in my answer, discussed the one-way aspect of Colorado that I think will actually alleviate some of the problems. We should have only one mode of movement at any given time. So we should have scrambles when people walk. We should have times when only one direction of traffic goes, times when traffic goes north and south. But it's occurred to me, although I know the Esplanade is very underway, that it might be better if Colorado went eastbound instead of westbound, so cars were only turning into it and not turning off of it going both directions.
And then finally, Whitney.
Well, we tried the one-way streets about 30 years ago, and it didn't work, and we went back to the two-way streets, although Sue does have a good idea. I have to tell you, the problem with this is there's so much congestion down there. We should have done this 30 years ago. And now it's just going to get worse. We have so many tourists coming in, and they spend money, and the city makes money off of them. But I have to park over on 9th Street in order to get down there because it's just so congested. Or else I'll ride my bike down there. But the thing is, you can't really have a date, on a bike, unless you're riding on the you just sit on the handlebars, hey, But anyway. But the thing is, it's like we can't go underground. So that's not going to work. So for the moment, we've got to just deal with it until we can come to a logical conclusion.
Thanks, Whitney. Do any of the wildcard holders want to answer this question? All right, I've just picked out 5 more names from the cup, and they are Phil Brock, Richard McKinnon, Michael Feinstein, Zoe Montaner, and Frank Gruber. And this question is from the Chamber of Commerce's Professionals Emerging at Business Leaders Committee. The question is, for young workers in the city, the cost of housing is often prohibitively expensive. Many of them are on their first job and often carry a substantial college debt. What can be done to make sure that there is an adequate supply of housing near their jobs in Santa Monica? Phil.
You can build entry-level, middle-class, low-rise housing in the city as it becomes available. You can also adaptively rehab other buildings so that they have housing. We have sort of a misnomer because we keep talking and we keep building a lot of ultra-low and low-cost housing, which is great, but the people who are driving in every day, they're not the ultra-low-cost housing people. They are that entry-level, middle-class housing that need places to live. So we do need to do that, but we have to make sure new housing stays in character with our city. So high rises are not in character with our city. They're in character with downtown LA. And I was sort of resentful today to see the Chamber's letter come out that said there was a small band of people that were just opposed to any change in the city. Well, I think that's wrong. The small band today needed to look in the mirror and see it was the Chamber, and I'm a Chamber member, and I was a little bit upset at that today. Thank you.
Richard McKinnon, adequate supply of housing near jobs for young people.
There are 2 ways of tackling it. First, the land use and circulation element rested Tier 2 as the major place that we would look at construction or development going forward that would be predictable development with predictable community benefits that would not threaten the immediate neighbourhood or the city. We haven't resolved the zoning on that, but when we do, that's where we intend that building will go ahead. That should bring down the cost of real estate because people are overpaying to then get into the development application market. The second thing is that we construct around the train stations in the downtown Memorial Park and Bergamot area, and we look at ensuring that the development around there is in scale with the streets and the street life, and encourage cap and trade money, investment by pension funds into Santa Monica, and various other methods of funding which will allow us to move forward with housing that's truly affordable for people that don't have a great deal of income.
Michael Feinstein.
So beyond the obvious saying, okay, we're going to require it in development agreements, one way to bring the costs down is to lower the parking requirements for younger people who are going to want to be in a downtown that has a rail line and take buses and ride bikes, like some of the people who are tweeting out that comment right now. So, it's $30,000 to $40,000 per parking space. You cut that out, it makes the unit more affordable, it makes it more possible for younger people who want to get started in the community. And a second specific thing is when I look at the Wyndham project and their community benefits, in addition to timing their phasing so that we can cap the freeway and put a park there, Arcadia Park, next to the Wyndham in between there and Tonga Park as a community benefit. In addition to that, I think we probably want to get some money from them to help subsidize other housing that will happen in the downtown and make that more affordable as well.
Thanks, Michael. Zoe.
Thank you for that question. I mentioned in a previous forum that I lived in New York and I lived in a single room occupancy SRO, and I don't understand why we don't have that development in Santa Monica yet. It made possible for me to go back to school. I was living in Brooklyn at the YWCA, and it gave me an exposure to a demographic of the city that needed attention. I'm currently developing 7 different companies, and 3 of them will be non-for-profits. And I will look forward working with Cross Campus, developing a job fair for millennials. I'm committed of having 80% of the people that will be working in the companies jobs for millennials. And I will also would like to be developing an internship program with SMC for credit, and also Crossroads, New Roads, Samo High, and the rest of our schools. So I'm committed, I'm a job creator, and I'm committed to create jobs for this specific population in our city. Thank you.
Frank Ruber.
Well, one of the problems is that we adopted this land use element in 2010 that has too much office development and not enough housing. And part of my platform is to switch the ratios there and drastically reduce the amount of office and switch that development to housing. And the interesting thing is I was writing about this all through from 2005 to 2010 in the column I wrote. And I have to say that if the city council had followed me on that, we wouldn't have had the Hines problem, probably, because basically the Hines didn't lose by much. Both Sue and Richard on the Planning Commission voted for a full-size housing Hines project with about 150,000 less office and more residential. And as city council, Tony Vasquez and Ted Winter did the same thing. And Kevin said he would be for a Hines project if it was all housing with a little bit of retail. So if we had gotten those votes, if Hines had been willing to change, which unfortunately they weren't, but they were following the loose, then that thing might have passed, and we wouldn't have, because people would like it, because it would have more housing. And that's what we need in Santa Monica right now, is more housing and not more office.
Thanks, Frank. Does anyone want to use a wild card on this question? All right, Nick.
Feel like I got to. So there is a definite emergency going on right now. If you look about 15 years ago, there were 30,000 low to moderate income units available. Fast forward to today, it's down to 18,000. So something isn't working. I know that I've created, and a lot of my friends have created, a false consciousness that we should be living with roommates, and that is a way of life that's normal. but it shouldn't be that way. We should be able to have our own places and raise families. So the way that we can do that is by creating more housing, specifically focused around the transit-oriented development, so that we do not have to use our cars. And that will cut a major expense right there without having a car payment, car insurance, as well as gas. On top of that, we can look at collaborating with different developers to create tiered rental costs that is attached to an income level for each person that doesn't fall within the 30% affordable but can afford the market. So it'd be pegged to your actual income, and there would be percentages of new developments that are reserved for those middle class entering workforce and people. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Kevin.
Yeah, I held out for housing because housing affordability and housing stability have always been my top issue. If you don't get to live in Santa Monica, all the other wonderful amenities don't mean much to you. And in Santa Monica, one of the things that happened to our affordability was a state law called the Costa-Hawkins Act. So we are in a moment of crisis. I look at this space, I realize the people who work here would all love to live in Santa Monica if they could afford it. Every year, I sit on the stage at Santa Monica High School and watch our students, our children, walk off the stage with their diplomas. When they come back home to Santa Monica after college, they can't afford to live here. That's wrong. So what do? Well, we have to produce more housing. And that actually is good for our traffic problems, because if people who work here can live here, that's that many fewer people who have to commute and pollute. Housing creates about a third as much traffic as does commercial space. So what I will do is I will amend the loose to provide more housing and less commercial.
Thanks, Kevin. Any other takers? All right, we'll move on to the last question of the main round. Just picked out the order, and it's going to be Pam O'Connor, Jerry Rubin, Jennifer Kennedy, and Terence Later. Imagine that you're elected on November 4 and that your vision for the city is carried forward by the council. 10 years from now, what would your ideal Santa Monica look like? Start with you, Pam.
Well, we're starting to see it already. We see it here because we're at a time when things are changing. They're changing fast right now. They're going to continue to change, partly because the millennial generation, that generation born between 1980 and the early 2000s, the largest generation, at least in our lifetimes, larger than the baby boomers, are changing the way we do things. Things like this co-work space, things like the city growing its CityNet network, which now we're the first city that offers 100 gigabyte service, growing that network, extending it to affordable housing because they're the ones least served by the private sector. These kinds of things allows that energy in Santa Monica, allows us to thrive, to continue the high level of services that we have today. Because as the baby boomers are aging, that intergenerational connection is going to be important. Helping our public schools, maintaining that high level of public schools. I can't see the little thing. Thank you, 10 seconds. High level public schools. A community where people of all ages are able to thrive, to do lifelong learning, to have secure homes, to be safe, and to have a loving community.
Jerry Rubin, what would your ideal Santa Monica look like in 10 years?
Well, my beautiful wife Marissa and I are very lucky to be living in Santa Monica in the Ocean Park area and plan to be living here the rest of our life. When I ask people, what do they think of Santa Monica? I say almost invariably, they say they love Santa Monica. People from all over the country, all over the world. So I'd like to say we continue on the same path of sustainability. We try to maintain a AAA bond rating. I'm looking forward to the new movie theaters and the revitalizations. I want to see iconic architecture, so I don't mind seeing a few well-designed hotels that are going to have more union jobs, even on Ocean Avenue, and a free museum in the Geary project, and more open space, and millions of dollars in community benefits that are going to be needed to keep funding the social service programs and the seniors programs and the money for the homeless that everyone is used to, and rightfully so. So I think we're on the right track and should continue in that way.
Jennifer Kennedy.
So my vision would be that in 10 years, We are seeing that our small businesses that already exist in Santa Monica have been able to thrive here, and that the small businesses that want to stay open in Santa Monica are thriving, and that the ones that want to open are able to do so on our boulevards to provide more neighborhood-serving retail that is friendly to our neighborhoods, so that people can have more services near where they live and they can walk and be sustainable in our community. I would also make sure that our neighborhoods are zoned properly so that our existing occupied housing is more protected to prevent displacement. And I would also make sure that I would want to see that the bikeways throughout Santa Monica have better connections and are plentiful, so the millennials and others who want to bicycle ride throughout Santa Monica have a safe way to do so. As a Gen Xer, I'm very in touch with my inner millennial.
Thanks, Jennifer. And then finally, Terrence. Terrence, yeah.
Well, as many of you know, I led the community effort to landmark Shay J's, so that's where I'd be thinking about all this. The idea that we could hold on to the few landmarks that are left. I'd be looking forward to going to a concert at the Santa Monica Civic, maybe even a surf film with Bruce Brown narrating from stage. That's the town that I grew up in. The idea that we won't be living in a construction zone. The educational system for our kids will be completely sustainable at that time. There will be no more corruption in City Hall. Also, as far as the idea that we could reach out to everybody and know that we're not living in a construction zone. My website is votenowforlater.com, and
Thanks, Terrence.
Very much.
For those who haven't used your wild card, now's your last chance. We'll go to Sue.
I've been waiting for this question. I have a 21 and a 24-year-old, and while I would love them to live in Santa Monica, what I'm trying to do is educate them so that one day they may be able to move back here because they have good jobs and can afford it. That being said, I hope in 10 years we have iconic architecture and not these awful stack and pack buildings. We have housing for families so that we continue to need our great schools and our great services. We have housing for all income levels, and that is a terrible problem to solve, but I think that if we put our minds to it, we can solve it. I think we need to have a real living wage here, and by the way, in my view, $15.37 is a start, but it's hard to live on $600 a week. And we need a government that's responsive so anybody can walk into City Hall without a Public Records Act request and get what documents they'd like to see.
Thanks. Who else hasn't used their wild card? Did Zoe go already? Zoe answered business already. John.
You know, I told Sue I was waiting for this question. You know, I've always lived in the future. I was born in the wrong. I'm a baby boomer, and I should have been born 50 years later. That's why I keep talking about a virtual town hall. If I was on the council, I would advocate as quickly as possible to put that on the city website and get it up and go. This city is wired for the future. Let's use that technology. But I want to have the residents meet with me on all these different topics we've been talking tonight and sit down and tell the city staff what we want to do in the future. I'm tired of the city's council and the city staff making decisions without listening to us. This is our city, and I'm going to take it back.
Thanks. Was that everybody? Richard? All right, cool. All right, we're going to wrap up very shortly. We're going to do one last lightning round, so if we can keep to 30 seconds or less, that would be great. And then we're going to give each candidate 1 minute to have a closing statement. The lightning round question is, if you could reverse one major council vote this year, what would it be and why? I'm just going to pull names as we go. First one is going to be Richard McKinnon.
Not this year, but last year. The one major decision on the Planning Commission that I've regretted from the second voting was the Village Trailer Park authorisation. But we were forced into that by an owner who suggested that unless we gave appropriate community benefits to the 280 residents, old and infirm, unless we did that, that they would be out without anyone to look after them. We did that, and I think we provided a lot of community benefits to them, but the problem was that he took home the river of gold from the rezoning of that village trailer park, and I believe it was simply the worst single decision that we've made, both as a planning commission and as a council.
Thanks, Richard. And we will expand it, so not just this year, but recent years. What would you overturn? Next person, Kevin McEwen.
I not only voted against Village Trailer Park once, I brought it back to vote against it again. And the reason why that's the decision we made that I most regret is because we shamefully evicted vulnerable seniors from their long-term homes. And that, to me, went against everything Santa Monica has always stood for. As much as I'm for building new housing for people to live here, we shouldn't be building it on the backs of people who have spent their lives here and contributed to our community. The people who voted for the Village Trailer Park project, and it was the council majority, I think should hide their heads in shame.
Nick Bowles, what decision would you overturn?
I would have, I would have really have liked to have seen the Hines project go to a direct democracy initiative, just because there was a change in votes and there was residential housing. There wasn't enough, but I'd be really interested to see if the people would have directly approved that project or if they would have shut it down like we think they would have.
Pam O'Connor.
Well, hang on. Actually, I'm a little philosophical about it. In that there are things that I wish would have gone other ways, but then again, I actually do respect the vote of the council, even when I'm on the minority side of position. So I think that each of us has the obligation, whether on the council, on the planning commission, any board or commission, to sit there, to listen, to read the materials, to listen to what people are saying. And that means not just the people who come to the meeting, but the emails you get, the people you run into the market, the folks who are the wide range of Santa Monicans, and then consider that, and then
Thanks, Pam.
do learn from it.
Whitney Scott Bain.
This is a good one. I would have the city council call me back when they did. I would have the city council go over and support our seniors like they said they would. My mother was a victim of rent control, and I called every city council member for help. Only 2 called back. And the one said, there's nothing I can do. The other one said, go to legal aid. Legal aid was ready to sell my mom out. Why the city council didn't get involved with my 88-year-old mother who was being forced out of her rent-controlled apartment for the last 30 years she lived in, never made a sound, but she was being forced out for making noise, is beyond me.
Thanks, Whitney. I'm going to go with Terence later.
Thank you very much. I would like to see that the city council is not choking off the airport. The idea that there's plenty of opportunities to get together to make it a safer airport, biofuels, the safety buffers, sound maintenance, and all that, smaller, quieter jets is what we need. That's a national treasure that we have there, and it needs to be protected. So I'm really looking forward to yes on D passing.
Jerry Rubin.
Well, I guess I'm going to bring up something that took place years and years ago and was pretty controversial. It was a close vote. I don't want to bring it up again, but I just feel compelled to mention that it's always irked me that we fluoridated our water. I think forced fluoridation was not good for our city. I remember Ken Genzer said, hey, I don't know about fluoridation, but it's a pro-choice issue as well. So there's been a lot of problems. I don't think it was good for our city, and I wish that could have been overturned.
Phil Brock, what would you overturn?
Some other council members have already mentioned this. The Village Trailer Park, the displacement, forced displacement now of families and people who've lived in our city for decades, who worked as blue-collar workers, Douglas, at the post office, at the fire department, is disgraceful in our city. And then the second is obviously Hines, because if the city council majority had voted the way residents wanted them to, we would not have had to go out and get a petition going. 13,500 residents would have had to make a decision.
Don't be that guy. Zoe Montana.
Yes, any vote that has allowed NMS properties become the bully in the city, it's unacceptable, completely hideous. NMS Properties has been allowed to put a restaurant in a courtyard in 829 Broadway, refused to accept rent from me, and then put an unlawful eviction. When my rent was paid, they also put a vent next to my bedroom window, and my apartment smelled like burgers. They are responsible for the displacement of affordable housing tenants, most of them millennials or elders. Thank you.
Thanks, Zoe. John Mann.
Well, Village Trailer Park is top of the list. Another thing that really irritated me, because I never got to use it, is the Camera Obscura building for seniors. I want that back because I never got to go there. And I'm a senior. But the most contemptible decisions that have been made has been allowed, this council, and it's not just the Gang of Four, it's all of them, have allowed our rent control stock to diminish. And they keep saying they want to bring more housing into the city. Well,
thanks, John. Jennifer Kennedy.
There we go. So since you expanded it to go back a little bit in time, and I certainly can't go over it all in 30 seconds, but there's a lot about the loose that really needs to be changed, and the Planning Commission is currently taking a look at that, and the current council and the future council will deal with that immediately. This is a good opportunity for me to talk about the Esplanade project. The wide sidewalk on the Esplanade is on the Holiday Inn, the Wyndham Hotel side, and the side where all the stores are has a really narrow sidewalk. That project needed to be looked at more closely.
Thanks, Jennifer. Michael Feinstein.
Well, it's easy to talk about development, but I'm going to say that I think the council made a mistake in the way that the bike share program is conceived to be funded by making it an advertising-based model instead of lobbying for cap and trade funds where there's a direct nexus. I don't want to have to go around and decide if I want to get a bike share that I have to become a walking advertisement for a corporation. That's, ugh.
Frank Ruber.
Well, we're getting close to the end of this campaign, so it's kind of my last chance to bring up the decision about Target. There was supposed to be a Target at 5th and Santa Monica. Ken Genzer, before he died, said it was the most inexplicable decision in his whole year on council that wasn't approved. A year and a half ago, Ted Winter, in an interview with The Lookout, said that would be the one decision that he wished he could go a different way, that we did have a Target, so we had affordable shopping in Santa Monica, and we didn't have to drive out of town. And it's an example about how people, when they let their fears do their planning for them, they get bad planning.
And finally, Sue Himmelrich.
Yeah, so I became involved in Santa Monica politics in connection with Village Trailer Park. I pointed out to the council before the development agreement, which was later rescinded, was approved, that the developer was counting parking spaces as affordable housing, that the developer was counting a lot that wouldn't ever be available and he wasn't building housing on as affordable housing. I think that we make decisions here without thinking about what we're doing and without considering the real truth.
Thanks, Sue. All right, this is the very final segment of the evening, so we're 14 minutes away from being finished, so we apologise for going a little bit over. But each candidate, you have 1 minute as your closing statement. We're going to start with Kevin McEwen.
I'll take that.
I'm Kevin McKeown, and for many years I've been a leader of the pro-resident faction on our city council. So I am running on my record, and you can find my record on my website, mckeown.net, so I'm not going to go through it. And I've had that website since 1996. It's not just a campaign website. What I want to talk about is that. I want to talk about technology, because we're here in this place where so many innovative people are creating new businesses. Before I was on the city council, I served on the city telecommunications task force, and I helped write the plan that resulted in our putting dark fiber into every trench we dug in the city of Santa Monica, so that now we have the network, CityNet, that provides 100 gigabits, not gigabytes, and I know the difference, for connectivity for businesses in this town. And it means that you get net access without throttling, with absolute net neutrality, through the city of Santa Monica. That's the sort of leadership, that's the sort of innovation, that's the sort of future thinking that I will continue to do on the city council. I'm Kevin McKeown. I'm surfing for your vote.
Richard McKinnon.
I'm Richard McKinnon, and elections are always about the future. They're always about the vision of what sort of city that you want. And my vision of the city is a vision that's driven by what people's form and function and their minds can produce, what sort of economic future can grow out of the creativity of the people that live here, not the sort of buildings that we build and the height and the density that we construct. That's an old way of thinking about how cities have an economic future. But to have a creative future, that means you need to control the development. You need to think about putting residents first. You need to turn the city a deep green as fast and as hard as you can. And on all of these issues, I bring a very compelling and powerful record as a planning commissioner, because the question that needs to be answered is who you trust to sit on the city council and lead us towards this new vision.
Nick Bowles.
First of all, how cool is it that we are standing in the same place that President Obama came and gave a speech speaking about how important the new generation is in entrepreneurialism and creating fresh perspectives to be able to solve familiar challenges. And that's exactly what I'm doing here. Is I am trying to build a bridge across our generations and really take the reins and create community ownership for our new generation to connect with those who came before us, so that we can move Santa Monica forward and we can build a better tomorrow. So once again, my name is Nick Bowles. I'm running for city council. My website is bowles2014.com. I really want to work with everyone here to make a better tomorrow and make sure that Santa Monica stays a livable city that we can afford to stay in and raise families. Thank you.
You could pass the mic to Sue Himmelrich.
Sue Himmelrich, 22-year resident of Santa Monica. I'm an attorney at Western Center on Law and Poverty. I believe our city is at a tipping point. I think that we are on the verge of becoming the playground of the 0.1% and not the wonderful town with great services, great schools, and a real family fabric that was here before. I think that the new business is fantastic. I have kids who are in the millennial generation, but Santa Monica will lose its meaning if we are no longer a town that has progressive values. I've been endorsed by the Santa Monica Democratic Club and the LA County Democratic Party, by SMER, by Residocracy. I listen to residents, the Sierra Club, because I want to hear what you have to say and make that happen in Santa Monica. So I'm Sue Himmelrich, and I ask for your vote.
Pam O'Connor.
Hi there, I'm Pam O'Connor, and I want a sustainable future for our exceptional city. I've been endorsed by community leaders, by the Community for Excellent Public Schools, by leaders like Supervisor Zev Yaroslavsky, by environmental groups, the Los Angeles League of Conservationists, by our public safety, police and firefighters, as well as the Los Angeles County Democratic Party. I want a future for Santa Monica that brings in and ushers in new transportation options. I've been a leader for Expo. Most of us are looking forward to Expo coming in 2016. I work hard to protect neighborhoods, to protect renters' rights. I stand for good jobs and good wages. I stand for excellent public schools. I want us to continue to be a community that is sustainable, that is inclusive, that is a place where our children can grow, thrive, learn, and become great citizens, great participants in our community. And as those of us who age, we have a wonderful life supported by the energy of the new generation. Thank you all. I ask for your vote November 4th, Pam O'Connor.
Michael Feinstein.
So I'm a 30-year resident and renter, former mayor, council member. Those of you who knew me in office know that I'm a very positive, creative, big picture, solutions-oriented, common sense person. And I think that we can evolve as we talk about development. I think we can keep our beachfront character as a community and still evolve with changing times. And that happens if you really sit and listen to everybody and try and integrate that. And that's how I governed when I was in office before. You know, if you watch or listen to Which Way LA, Warren Only, and he's constantly going back and he said, yeah, but so-and-so said this, but then so-and-so said that, and you go back and forth. You strengthen everybody's positions when you do that. That's how my mind works. That's how I governed. And if you are so nice to put me back in office, I'll do that again for another 4 years. Thanks.
Phil Brock.
I'm Phil Brock. I've been chair of the Recreation and Parks Commission. I've been a Recreation and Parks Commissioner now since 2003. I have a lifetime of experience and a lifetime of volunteering in Santa Monica. I'm a native of the city, and I'm concerned that when your children and your grandchildren grow up, that when they look behind a palm tree in Santa Monica, they will see the sky behind it, not an office building. I'm concerned in Santa Monica that we won't be stuck in traffic all the time. I'm an optimist because I believe we can change where we're going, and I believe we can make our city better. I ask for your vote November 4th to help our city come together. Thank you.
Whitney Scott Bain.
Well, I've grown up here 44 years, worked for the Evening Outlook, worked at the Arrow and the Wilshire as a kid, worked at Browse Wing Helicopter when I was 15 years old. So I know the airport inside and out. I tell you, we got to save that airport, and the airport's real important. Vote yes on D and no on LC. D stands for democracy, LC is loss of control. The other thing, too, this is such a great community. We all have to get to want to know one of each other. And the deal is we don't have that anymore. We're all little enclaves. There used to be a time when you were a kid, you could walk down the street and moms talked with moms and dads talked with dads and everybody knew everybody, but you don't have that anymore. And I think it's just antisocial. Well, I'm endorsed by the Santa Monica Airport, the pilots and aircraft mechanics, the artist galleries at the Bergamot and the airport, and also the Ken Edwards senior community.
Frank Gruber.
Yeah, hi. I also moved to Santa Monica more than 30 years ago, and I've been very actively involved in politics in Santa Monica for 20 years. And I also have a long record, both from my service on the Housing and Planning Commission in the 90s and for a column I wrote for a long time for the Lookout News. I haven't been to as many meetings as Jerry, but I've been to a lot. I also have, I think, a very I consider a multi-generational perspective on Santa Monica. I live in Ocean Park. I work downtown, as I said, in a 1929 building. My 93-year-old dad lives in one of the new apartments on 6th Street. I get him to the hospitals, and I'm very pleased that we have that kind of care for elder people. My 24-year-old son is currently living at home while he goes to graduate school at UCLA, and through his cohort, I see all the issues that young millennials have in dealing with Santa Monica. So I think I have a good perspective on what goes on in Santa Monica. I've been endorsed by the public safety unions, the police and fire, by Community for Excellent Public Schools, by the LA League of Conservation Voters, by Unite Here Local 11, and I believe that I bring a very balanced perspective to Santa Monica. Thank you.
Zoe Montano.
Mi nombre es Zoe Montaner. I was born in Puerto Rico, but no, I don't know Jello, I don't know Sonia Sotomayor, and I don't know Rita Moreno. What I have in common with them is that I'm a hard worker, I get things done, and I'm a tireless worker. I understand the tourism industry better than anybody here because Puerto Rico's #1 industry is tourism, and my sister worked for 2 hotels. I also have contacts in Washington, D.C. with Pedro Pierluisi, who is the commissioner resident of Puerto Rico, and 4 different congressmen that are from Puerto Rico as well. So when you vote for me, you're voting for someone who has extensive experience, not only in the private sector, but also in the public sector, who has connections with Washington, and who understand development and tourism, and as an engine to development and responsible development in the city. Thank you so much, and go to my website, www.zoe4citycouncil.org or compassionatesantamonica.org. Thank you so much.
John Mann.
I'm John Mann, and I approve this message. I have an 11-year-old son, and I'm worried about the kind of world that he's going to grow up in. Now, I'm running a paperless, penniless campaign. I'm a Green Party member for decades. I'm proud to say that I am not endorsed by Santa Monica's Renters' Rights, and I am not endorsed by the city employees. None of this paper is from me. Don't believe the lies and propaganda and what you're getting in the mail. I have a stamp here. That's all my campaign literature. If you want to be stamped, come up to me after the meeting, and I'll give you a stamp. Thank you again, and good luck in the election, because this is your city.
Jerry Rubin.
Well, again, I want to sincerely thank the Santa Monica Mirror, the Chamber of Commerce, and Cross Campus for doing this. And I urge you to go to the Mirror candidate forum tomorrow at the main library at 5:30 to hear the candidates for the school board and the college board. Don't forget, it's not only the council. We got all kinds of other stuff. Board of Supervisors, State Senate, Congress, on and on, so stay involved. One issue that hasn't been touched on tonight is the issue of public art and art. It's become a sustainable city goal, and that's positive. We're working now to save this beautiful, environmental-friendly Muir Woods mural. We worked for 2 years to save Paul Conrad's chain reaction. We helped the city. We raised over $100,000. Many of you here contributed, and I think the support for public art is really important. I want to thank Evan Meyer from Beautify Earth. They did a fundraiser here a few months ago, and they're doing the murals on Lincoln Boulevard.
Thanks, Jerry.
More beautiful.
Terrence Slater.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Jerry. I have my guardian from Beautify Earth, my guardian bracelet here. As a lifelong resident, I've been able to watch the changes go on in our city, and I want to be the caretaker, and I want to be the protector, and I want to be the guy that stands up and makes sure that what's left of our landmarks are kept in place. If you look amongst our group up here, there's some that have been involved with our government for over 2 decades. Do we like what our city looks like now that they've been here and the decisions that they've made? The idea is we need fresh thoughts. We need to have a balanced budget. We need to stop the millions of dollars that are going out of our city, and we need to reassess the education that our kids are getting. We need to be able to stand up for Santa Monica as residents. I will protect the residents' view first. Thank you very much. VoteNowForLater.com. Check it out. Vet me. I marched with Tom Hayden, and now I'm sitting here to stand up and be.
Thanks, Terrence. And finally,
well, these guys had more dings than I did all night. I was trying to catch up.
And finally, to wrap up the evening, we have Jennifer Kennedy.
Jennifer.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Kennedy, and my website is jenniferkennedy.nationbuilder.com, and I built it myself with the help of Nation Builder, of course. I'm running because I'm interested in controlling growth, continuing my work, controlling growth, preserving our residential neighborhoods, and improving our city's public process. I'm the only candidate running who has spent the past 4 years studying the issues that are facing our community on the Planning Commission, and as an elected member, serving our community as an elected member of the Rent Control Board before that for 8 years. I'm proud to be supported by Santa Monicans for Renters' Rights and endorsed by council members Kevin McCune, Tony Vasquez, and Ted Winterer, and endorsed by the National Women's Political Caucus LA Westside. I have spent nearly 15 years serving our community as a community activist on city boards and commissions and in our school district on advisory committees, and I am ready to take it to the next level. I spend my time between meetings working with elected officials and local leaders on making real positive change in Santa Monica, protecting renters' rights, preserving our residential neighborhoods, and continuing the tradition of arts and innovation in Santa Monica. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer, and thank you, candidates. If we could all give a round of applause, thank them for coming out this evening.